If you want to see Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton be the next head coach for the Denver Broncos, like today's video, don't jinx it. Get the good coaching vibes up in the mile-high air. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about a pretty big ESPN bombshell report that came out from Jeremy Fowler and some other coaching news, including Jim Caldwell being the third interview the Broncos have conducted thus far. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. I am your host, Matthew Peterson. And on this Jeremy Fowler report, he talked about what's going on at all the head coaching vacancies. And he said that in Denver, it appears Sean Payton is target number one, and Jim Harbaugh is backing up Sean Payton. So now we sort of got conflicting rumors because we're going to get a lot of twists and turns over the next couple of weeks throughout this saga, if you will. I thought Harbaugh was number one. Now it appears Sean Payton might be in the driver's seat for this job, at least in terms of what Denver's wish list is. Payton 1, Harbaugh 2. Let's go right to the horse's mouth, though. Here's what Jeremy Fowler wrote. After talking to several industry sources this week, the sentiment I hear a lot is this. If Payton says no to Denver, then Harbaugh will be the lead candidate. Still much to play out, with Denver waiting to talk to Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, and others. So, we've got an interesting kind of, I wouldn't say twist to the story maybe, but a slight detour because in my eyes, Jim Harbaugh is at least personally my number one candidate. Now, I might not see eye to eye with Walton-Penner, and that's fine. They're the ones actually in the interviews. But Sean Payton is going to cost a little bit, right? They're probably going to be the same paycheck-wise, but the first rounder most likely to get Sean Payton, and I'll explain why later on in the video, should not be a deal breaker, but that's definitely going to be an influence in the decision. Now, here's Jeremy Fowler also wrote this here. But I've continued to hear that Denver has done a lot of research on Harbaugh, talking to people who have worked with him in the past to gauge his coaching style. One official from a team searching for a head coach believes Harbaugh wants the Colts job. No word yet on whether Harbaugh plans to speak with Indy brass, but the connection is obvious for the former Colts quarterback. I think the Colts are probably like the worst job right now of the opens one. No, the Texans might be worse, but still, if Harbaugh is coming back to the NFL, like Jim Irsay is plenty rich, he can give him a lot of money too. I don't know if he can give him, Walmart type of money, but I would think the Broncos job is better, especially with Russell Wilson. I know not playing well at all this year, but showing some optimism going into 2023 with the way he played after Nathaniel Hackett. In fact, later on in the video, we're really going to tear Hackett a new one. But let's talk more about Sean Payton here. The Broncos cannot interview him until January 17th. So a week from today is the first possible day that an interview could be conducted. Now, Sean Payton was on the Fox pregame on Sunday, and he said he talked with the ownership, which maybe some collusion, shout out the league, great show, but not quite sure. Now, the Broncos, Payton stressed in a little, I wouldn't say an interview, but an open mic sesh on that Fox pregame show for the NFL Sunday, saying his biggest necessities when he's looking at teams is ownership, right? He wants to know the triangular relationship of the head coach, ownership, and front office. In my opinion, if you look at the open spots, who's got the best ownership? The Broncos do. I know it's new, but I would still think the Broncos front office, the organization as a whole, is like tier one, right? It's way better than the Houston Texans, way better than the Cardinals. I think it's better than the Panthers. So the Broncos and the Saints are aligned also on trade compensation, right? Denver knows you're going to have to trade for Sean Payton. They're not going to let him just walk out the door for nothing. And they appear to be willing to engage in talks, or at least further talks for Sean Payton, knowing what the asking price is. So it could be something like this. It could be something simple like 2023 first-round pick, which belongs to the Broncos via the Dolphins, via the 49ers, for Sean Payton. Now, I understand the caution of, I don't want to trade a first-round pick, right? This team desperately needs their first-round pick, and that's true. But it's not the Broncos' first-round pick. It's not the 5th overall pick. It's the 49ers. The 49ers are playing the Seahawks in the playoffs on Saturday. And if they were to beat the Seahawks, which I think they will, well, if they were to lose the next round or the NFC Championship game or in the Super Bowl, it's going to be a late first-round pick. And I talked about this on yesterday's show, that late first-round picks are not always hits. In fact, I went back to 2019 because I think it's fair to grade the 2019 draft class now. They've had 3 seasons. And look at the drop-off here, right? Titus Howard in 23rd overall to Houston, B grade, maybe B+. Josh Jacobs, kind of a slow-ish start, B+, but he's the NFL rushing leader this year. But after that, like later in the first round, it gets pretty bad. Look from the Raiders 27th onward. I give Abram an F. Jerry Tillery a D-, LJ Collier a D+, DeAndre Baker an F-. He's not even in the league right now. Caleb McGrary a C-. All those guys did not have their 5th-year option picked up. So if the Broncos get the 29th or the 28th overall pick from the Niners, yeah, there are plenty of examples of that being a hit, but also it's worth noting it could be a big-time dud. And would you rather have a defense, an offensive lineman or whatever that isn't on the team after their rookie contract, or Sean Payton to save and salvage Russell Wilson? Remember, the Saints were really pushing for Russ for a good stretch there. So Sean Payton clearly has some affinity for Russ and some belief that he knows how to coach him best up, right? How to coach him up to the best of his abilities here. Now, let's say you don't want to give up a first-round pick. I understand that. What about this trade? I'm kind of getting a bit creative here. No first-rounder, but what about this year's 3rd-round pick and next year's 2nd? They get their 2nd round back from Seattle next year. And I'm going to kick in Greg Dulcich. I think this might get it done. The Saints do need a tight end. It's not a first-rounder, but it's a 2nd and a 3rd. And Greg Dulcich, who is going into his 2nd year, and he showed a lot of great flashes and moments during his rookie season. The Saints need a tight end. They don't get a first. I get it. That's upsetting. But I think this is a pretty fair compensation as well. So between those 2 trades, which trade do you like more? Is it giving up the first rounder and holding on to a 2nd, a 3rd, and Greg Dulcich? Or is it parting ways with two day 2 picks and Greg Dulcich? Let me know in the comment section below. Really curious what you have to say here. Moving on now, let's talk about the latest Harbaugh rumors. So, I prefer Harbaugh over Payton, right? I think that Harbaugh has shown that it's very close, right? I'm not going to be upset whether it's Harbaugh or Payton. You know what I mean? Like, if they go one direction, not the other, I'm still going to be happy because I both think they are great candidates. But at the end of the day, if I had to pick one personally, I'm rolling with Jim Harbaugh. The way he took over that 49ers team, that was awful, and I mean bad beforehand, and got them to the NFC Championship game in year 1. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Sean Payton. He won a Super Bowl, but he also had Drew Brees and only won 1 Super Bowl. Like, when you're picking between 2 amazing elite coaches, the margin for difference is going to be very slim here. Let's get some other coaching news now here. So, Josina Anderson tweeted out this morning that Jim Caldwell is interviewing for the Denver Broncos head coaching gig. Plenty of other sources have verified it. He is the third coach to interview for the Broncos head coaching opening here. Here is the updated interview list. So, they have talked to Evero. That was their first in-person interview yesterday. They also did a virtual interview with Jim Harbaugh for a couple hours before then. And now you can add Jim Caldwell to the list. And we'll talk about Caldwell, kind of go over his bio and what he's done in the league. But DeMeco Ryans, Raheem Morris, Dan Quinn, they are all coaching this weekend. So maybe expect something next week in terms of an interview for them. But today's show was made possible by BetUS. The whole Chat Sports office is ridiculing me because I'm a big believer in Cowboys -2.5 against the Bucs. I want to know what your pick is this weekend. Let me know where I can make money on BetUS when you go to chatsports.com/bet and use promo code Broncos125. BetUS is going to give you a 125% deposit bonus. Let's expand on Jim Caldwell, though, for a moment here. So, he was with the Colts, right? Took over after Dungy, if memory serves correct here. Went to the Super Bowl, 2009, 14-2. And then 2010 went 10-6. 2011 went 2-14. That's the year when Peyton Manning was out with a neck injury, and we know the rest after that. Overall, in Indy, he went 26-22. Now, after that, he got another head coaching gig in Detroit. So this would be head coaching opportunity number 3 for Caldwell. With the Lions, 11-5, year 1. That's pretty good. We're talking about a dumpster fire of an organization. 7-9, and then they kind of plateaued 2 straight seasons at 9-7. It was a mistake firing Jim Caldwell. I think Detroit would admit that right now. Overall, in his entire NFL career, he is 62-50 as a head coach. So it brings me to this. If Harbaugh wants to stay at Michigan and Sean Payton goes to the Cowboys because they somehow lose to the Bucs this week, who do you want, right? Who's in that second tier of coaches after Harbaugh and Payton? Dan Quinn, Jim Caldwell, maybe in-house, Evero. Let me know down below. Personally, I'm rolling with Dan Quinn. I think Dan Quinn should have gotten the job last year. If I have a time machine, well, YouTube does have a time machine. We can just go back and look. I talked about Dan Quinn, right? A year ago right now, Dan Quinn was my number one guy. And I remember when they hired Hackett going, I'm going to be optimistic because I want it to work, but I wish they went with Dan Quinn because I know things didn't end gracefully in Atlanta after the 28-3 blown lead. But Dan Quinn is a proven head coach who got to a Super Bowl, and he can learn from his mistakes, and he can do better the second time here. And I also believe this Broncos team is not an absolute, blast it to the earth's core, right into the middle of the sun, awful team, right? They had 9 one-score losses last year. And with better coaching, they don't kick a 79-yard field goal in week 1 in Seattle. They don't lose to the Colts by only scoring 3 field goals. They maybe are competitive and knock off the Chargers in week 6. The Jets in week 7. The Titans, that was an awful game. Week 10 at Tennessee. So I'm looking at these games here. There's 9 one-score losses. With a better coach, and we saw that under Rosberg the last 2 weeks, how much better this team could have been coached. Take these 9 games here. What if they go 5-4 in this stretch instead of 0-9? Well, now we're talking about a 10-win team that's in the playoffs. This team, I know I'm a bit delusional right now, but I think it's sneaky salvageable, right? I don't think it is god-awful, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. They had 9 one-score losses that I'm going to put a lot of it on the coaching, if not almost all of it. We saw in the last 2 weeks, you can salvage this team much better than maybe one would think. Maybe better than your average NFL fan. So for that reason, Dan Quinn, if he's on this team last year or this past season, whatever, I don't think they're a 5-win team. I don't think they're a 6 or a 7-win team. They're probably much closer to an 8, 9, 10. Not going to go as far as say 11, but way more than just 5 wins here. That's going to do it for us on today's show. I'm going to appreciate all of you guys for tuning into today's show, making us a part of your day. We'll sign off and see you guys later with more Broncos head coaching news and rumors.